welcome to the Football Outsiders Radio Hour on Twitch. Once again, not on the radio and not always an hour, but always on twitch.tv/FB Outsiders. 1 p.m. on Thursdays, Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific Time. Also with a new fantasy show next Tuesday, same time, 1 p.m. Eastern, with Scott Spratt, who's joining me today because we are all here. If you are watching the Twitch show, for those of you who are going to be afterwards listening on podcast, you will get to hear so many voices today. We are in Louisville, Kentucky, which is the headquarters of our parent company, Edge Sports, and the whole Football Outsiders clan is here. Not the whole clan, not all the contributors, but all the full-time folks. So from left to right on your screen, Mike Tanier/Tanier.
Tanner. He's Tanner now.
He was also Tanner yesterday for a while, yeah?
I'm just here dropping knowledge, Coach.
Me, Aaron Schatz, editor-in-chief, Vince Verhey, and our fantasy expert, Scott Spratt. We are at a studio in Louisville. How have you guys enjoyed our week here?
I've seen all the sites from Evan Williams to Bullet to Maker's Mark and the biscuits as well. So I think I've drunk deeply of most of what Louisville has to offer.
You joke, but I really enjoyed that Four Roses small batch at the bar.
That was a win.
And I'm not going to call myself a bourbon expert, but I do think I have a favorite Louisville bourbon now.
And it is the Four Roses small batch.
Four Roses small batch.
Brought to you by Four Roses small batch, ladies and gentlemen.
Conveniently, like 2 doors down from a hotel, I believe. But
today's episode is brought to you by the Louisville Tourism Council. No, my friends were like, oh my God, you're going to Kentucky. Louisville is a pretty cool hip city. I'm going to give it some points, man. The North Louisville neighborhood, a.k.a. New Lou, which is where the office is headquartered, has a ton of hip restaurants, most of which sell biscuits and bourbon. If you go to the Louisville airport has a theme. Like 90% of the advertisements are for bourbon.
We have a bourbon store larger than some like 7-Elevens I've seen.
Yes.
And that's all they sell. They may like bourbon chocolates, but
when I went to a coffee shop this morning, this guy told me about Kentucky coffee, which contains bourbon and brown sugar. And it's like, I may want to come back and get one. Well, he says, as of 7:30, I can sell you one. But Nulu is very boho, wouldn't you say?
Yes, this is the boho neighborhood, absolutely.
By the way, you have not introduced anybody else, have you?
No, I did.
Oh, okay.
I said Vince.
He gave
I
our
said
names.
Scott. Scott hasn't spoken yet, but that's because this has not been his preferred topic of conversation.
No, it's not that. It's
Scott does not drink bourbon.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's fair. But the other thing is I'm actually from the South, so it's not surprising to me that I would enjoy myself in a southern city.
Gotcha.
Right, us Northerners, or in Vince's case, Northwesterners.
Yeah.
That counts. I'm still a Yankee, I believe.
Vince was able to put out his full Seattle-ness yesterday in excitement over the Kraken expansion draft.
Yes, which I just don't know anything about, so don't ask me any Kraken questions. I can only repeat to you what I have read from ESPN experts and whatnot. But, audio change. Yes, it's recorded on my DVR at home, and I'll be checking that out when we get home over the weekend.
It did bring up the discussion of, wouldn't it be so much fun? Like, they're not going to do it because 32 teams is perfect, and going to, like, 34 teams would bring up all kinds of scheduling problems, like, as much as they would like the money. But, man, wouldn't it be fun to have an NFL expansion draft in this era of analytics, where we could actually, like, write analytically about the players who were available and, like, try to figure out the best strategy for the expansion teams? Like, it would be a lot of fun.
Am I too pessimistic to already want to dump Sam Darnold on an expansion team since he hasn't even played a game yet for my Panthers?
I would argue you're too optimistic to think a new team would want him.
No, that's why in an expansion you make them you only let him be the eligible poached player for the Panthers, right? You can restrict that.
I'm sorry, but the analytics say that the expansion team should not draft anybody, and they should just bank their money for the next 2 years and save their cap space and just go 0-17. That's the Moneyball building exercise.
They should trade their expansion draft picks for actual draft picks 5 years later.
Right. Have an empty stadium.
So Vince is going on from here to Nashville on vacation, which does bring up, we were talking earlier about, like, what are your cities that your dream travel cities that you've never been to? Like, where do you want to travel to that you've never gone to yet?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kick it off. I'm a huge golf nerd, so my choices would all be golf related.
Okay.
Would really love to
Perfect.
go to Scotland and Ireland, like kind of run through the Tom Coyne preferred courses in that part of the world. Also, I'm of Scottish heritage, so it'd be. I feel like I would just naturally appreciate links golf without having any reason to really believe that about myself. But it's kind of a romantic view of who I am as a person.
Nice.
I've been to Ireland. It's lovely.
Okay.
Not
yeah.
a golfer, but everything else is great anyway, so you'll have a good time.
Don't get caught in a parking garage in Ireland.
Oh, yeah, that story. Yeah, I got trapped in a parking garage in Ireland and escaped without international incident. Never been to Scotland. Scotland is a place I'd love to go. I've never been to Chicago outside the airport. I'm going to get to do that in September. Flying in to see the AEW show in Chicago and then spending the whole weekend there and actually being a tourist. Which leads me actually to my other real dream destination, which would be Tokyo, Japan.
Oh my.
In part because I would love to see a New Japan wrestling show at the Tokyo Dome. That would be fantastic. But I'm also into many other aspects of Japanese culture. Kaiju movies. There's a Godzilla museum now and Godzilla thrill rides that I pretty much need to see before I die. And just, Japan is a whole separate culture, country. You need to see a metropolis like Tokyo, also get out in the countryside, the mountains. And that would be my ultimate dream bucket list vacation that it's such a dream that I can't even think of when it would happen, but I would love to do it.
Yeah, Japan for me too, but for a totally different
I'm
reason.
sure.
I just want to eat my way through the country because I love Japanese cuisine so much. I'm not like one of those weird like anime-obsessed people, and I'm not into New Japan. I'm not into New Japan wrestling.
No.
We're on Twitch.
Yeah, I was like, shots fired at Derek Klassen as well, I believe.
No, his thing is Korean anime.
Oh, okay, my mistake.
His thing is like K-pop. He's like learning Korean and stuff.
That's awesome.
But I love the food, so I just want to go to Tokyo and eat all the food there. But and then in America, like I've been to all the pretty cool, interesting cities that have their own culture at this point. Like the last kind of culturally unique American city I hadn't been to was Miami until the Super Bowl 2 years ago. So at this point, like my desires to travel in America are just to stadiums I haven't been to that are cool. Like I'd like to go to a game at Lambeau at some point.
Sure.
Just want to tell our weeb community we love you. So there are two seasons sports-wise for me. Football season, which runs from camps opened, so now until end of June, and then Tour de France season, where I get to watch cycling for 3 weeks. I want to go to France. I want to go to not just Paris, but I want to be, and my wife and I go to some of those little towns at the tops of the mountains, at the bottom of the mountain, with the cathedral and the museum, and drink wine and good beer, eat cheese, and watch guys ride bicycles back real.
I thought maybe Mikey would be the fan that held the sign out so that it knocked the bicyclist off his seat.
They almost got the guillotine. Well, now, of course, it's completely inappropriate and insane. An epic crash, day one of the Tour de France, because somebody held a sign up and then the players just crashed into it. The cyclists crashed into it. Almost got the guillotine for it. No, I would not.
Imagine if the big game started with the Stanford band play. That's what happened.
That's exactly what happened. But no, that would be pretty straightforward. Everything's straightforward, though. Yeah, Scotland and Tokyo and Paris. But, that's a bucket list, right?
France is good too, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd love to go there. Useful Title says it's a good thought experiment. If there was a new expansion team in the NFL, would they be like the Panthers and the Jaguars and make the playoffs within 2 years? Or would they be like the Texans and,
and the new Browns
be terrible? And I think it depends on how they set up the expansion draft.
Yeah.
Like they set up the expansion draft for Carolina and Jacksonville so that they could get some useful players. Mm-hmm. And then they were like, oh, let's not do that again.
Right.
And they set it up to make it a lot harder on Cleveland and Houston.
I suspect it would be closer to that. I think they'd be a lot more restrictive about the players available and which players you could protect. And
but in the new era of rushing quarterbacks, though, if you got an early draft pick and you could get your season's Trey Lance or Justin Fields or Kyler Murray from a couple years ago, maybe you could immediately be really good.
You could also wind up with Deshaun Watson in the expansion draft. And
or David Carr.
Right, and there would be a lot of cap headaches exposed to expansion, probably. So it's like, and that's kind of what was with
That's what
Houston.
happened in the NHL, too, is that teams all exposed their cap headaches. And Vegas was like, 2 years ago, was like, all right, we'll take your cap headaches and build a team out of it. And they built like a team that went to the Stanley Cup Finals out of everybody's cap headaches.
And Seattle, from what I understand, basically avoided that strategy. Like the Stanley Cup, one of the Stanley Cup goaltenders was available but they turned him down because he's old and expensive.
I love the idea of avoiding the strategy that worked recently. That's pretty powerful.
Well, I
reasoning
think
there.
that I think the idea is that they may have nerfed that strategy a little bit for
Right.
Seattle because, I mean, I would think going forward that any of the 4 leagues that has an expansion draft, that the old teams would be like, okay, let's make sure nobody does Vegas on us here. Like, let's no Golden Knights, please. Like,
Right.
let's make sure that we don't suddenly allow some expansion team to go to our championship game.
So if there was one this year, and we didn't plan on talking about this, but I think it's a good question, who would be the best quarterback available in an expansion draft?
Deshaun. I'm
Deshaun?
guessing they would.
I'm not sure he counts as good, though, because you don't know if he's going to be available.
Yeah.
What
So-
about Marcus Mariota is kind of
Mariota's not
overpaid, right?
bad.
Yeah.
I think maybe Garoppolo.
Garoppolo.
Yeah.
Garoppolo they would probably not bother protecting him. They'd love to get his salary done with.
I was going to say
There's
Teddy
a-
Bridgewater, but
He would
Teddy Bridgewater's salary is probably low enough that
He's not.
you
Yeah, he's not making
could
that.
protect both Locke and Bridgewater.
Would the Packers dump Aaron Rodgers on an expansion team just as a spiteful, fun
No.
move?
No.
Maybe. Spite is a powerful, powerful emotion, as we are learning this offseason.
Yeah.
I think they would want to get.
What if they dumped Jordan Love? Would then things be all good? Sorry to derail us into a Packers combo, but
No,
you've
it's-
got to. It's required.
I don't think anyone's discussed Aaron Rodgers this offseason. I think we're the first to break this ground.
CO the legend says Kirk Cousins.
No, they
No, because I
He's
think the
good.
Vikings would protect them.
Who's their backup?
Kellen Mond.
Yeah,
They would not. No.
No, you're not just dumping a starting quarterback onto the expansion unless you are like angry with them for some
Oh,
way.
wait. I figured it out. It's Matt Ryan. It is Matt Ryan.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
at this point he's old and he makes tons of money.
They
and
had to
need
stretch him.
rebuild.
Yes.
He has 3 more years of
Yeah,
big
okay.
dead cap money,
Yeah.
and they can't get away from it. This
That's
would
a
be
very
this
good
would be the
call.
only way.
Or
That's a very
trade
good
him to
call.
the expansion team for picks and something. Like they could
Something.
do something like that.
Yeah.
Eat the cap space for us and be competitive and put somebody on the front of the media guide.
Coral Skipper says it's a shame they would never let Vegas happen again in an expansion draft because it did help immediately establish the team in the city in a way that it usually takes years to do.
Imagine being that forward thinking as a sports league to say be competitive right away.
I
new
would think that
market.
owners would not want to be like giving their spots in the finals to
Yeah.
expansion
that's
teams,
true,
though.
too, yeah.
They're happy to take their money, but they don't want those teams to actually be good for a while.
You haven't lived until you've sat in a youth sports dad's meeting for expanding your youth sports league and have the parents yelling and screaming about how you put together the expansion team. Like, they shouldn't be able to get all our best players. It's like, they're 8 years old.
Yeah.
Folks, this literally happens. Like, we have to make
Oh,
that. Those sorry kids, you're going to stink for 3 years because this is, it's bitty basketball for 8-year-olds, and that's what we've decided.
Oh man! So one of the things is we've been doing a bunch of promotional stuff here over the last couple days, and news breaks while you're doing promotions. So all the big news of the last couple days, which tended to revolve around the NFC West. So we're going to talk about the NFC West a lot on this show. All broke while we were doing stuff. It was really funny. We were like shooting promotional shots, and I looked at my Twitter on Tuesday and gasped really
Oh,
loud.
yes.
And everyone was like, did somebody die?
I thought legitimately war had broken out.
Yes.
All it was
Yes.
was a big fantasy football injury. But I was just like, oh my God, while we're here doing
Yeah.
stuff, Cam Akers tore his Achilles. And I
Yes.
just gasped really, really loud.
And I feel very badly for Cam Akers, and that's
Yeah.
terrible news. But yes, Aaron took this to heart.
The funny thing is, I mean, we all talked about this and agreed, even though we do not all hold, looking at some mic over here, we do not all completely hold to analytics orthodoxy when it comes to everything. The fact is, I think we're all generally in the running backs. There aren't like huge differences between running backs. So for the Rams and their actual like quality this year and ability to make the playoffs, it feels like Cam Akers getting injured doesn't mean that much. But for fantasy purposes, because he was going to put up such big numbers, it's like a huge. Poor Scott took Cam Akers in the Scott Fish Bowl, so he is the first Cam Akers owner that we were able to give our condolences to.
Well, I'm a glass half full kind of guy, so I feel like this is a cool penalty to give one of the fantasy experts in the league, and if I can win anyway, then that's pretty powerful stuff.
We actually got an email from a reader this morning asking us to write a story about how this injury would affect the Rams and their chances, and I assured him that wasn't going to happen.
Tell them we're doing it on Twitch right now.
Well, I let him know that it was not changing our projection for the Rams very much, and I also pointed him to where he could subscribe to our Kubiak fantasy projections at FootballOutsiders.com.
Nice work.
But suffice to say, his Darrell Henderson's rating has gone up very high.
It has. In fact, I mean, Aaron and I were arguing a lot about, I was giving Cam Akers a lot of receptions, which didn't really reflect what he had done over the full season last year.
There was a debate about this.
And
yes.
what the Rams offense hit. It was more about
Traditionally.
like the Rams offense not throwing to running backs.
And it's kind of a weird thing here where by losing Akers, it almost makes it more likely that Henderson as the replacement will get those receptions. And with the updated numbers here, we have Henderson with 250 carries and 40 catches for the season. So that is just a ton of work, and obviously then makes him, well, it makes him a top 10 running back in PPR. He's our 10th running back in PPR.
Wow.
The thing that this matters for the Rams, talking about how running backs by and large don't matter, but they really have less depth than most teams now that they've lost their starter. Behind Henderson, you have Jake Funk, a 7th-round rookie pick out of Maryland, who did not have a lot of work in college. He actually tore an ACL in the same knee 2 years in a row. So he ended up having just 135 career attempts and kind of got on draft radars because he was a really good performer in, not the combine because there wasn't a combine last year, but like in his pro days and stuff at Maryland. Then they have an undrafted back in Xavier Jones as well from the year before. So it's really hard to come up with other players to get work for the team that you would trust unless they end up signing somebody.
They're definitely like the Rams have always favored using, like McVay likes to use a workhorse back.
Oh, yeah.
We were talking about like last year, it's just that the workhorse back changed in the middle of
Yeah.
the season, but he always uses one guy. And Henderson was a backcast favorite. So like Scott came to me on Tuesday night and was like, we're going to be projecting Henderson to basically be a top 10 fantasy player. Do you have a problem with that? And I was like, are you projecting him to be a little bit lower than Akers? Yeah. Then I don't really have a problem with it because he's going to get all the carries and he's going to get all the usage. So
It's not just backcast because Henderson 21.4% rushing DVOA in 2020. That was 4th among running backs with 100 or more carries. Also a 17.2% receiving DVOA. Seems like he might be pretty good.
Yeah.
And honestly, I wrote the Rams chapter when Akers was drafted, and that draft pick confused me at the time.
because we were like Henderson's.
You
really
already
good.
have
Like,
Henderson.
yeah.
You don't have linebackers, but that's what they did.
Yeah, the Rams are very much not an off-ball linebacker team.
No.
It's like Micah. Is it Micah Kaiser? Yeah. I don't know. I was thinking Drew Kaiser for some reason, but I think that's a different person.
Yes, different person.
And Micah Kaiser and Kenny Young, who
Yes.
came over from Baltimore.
I throw in for the cornerback they traded.
Marcus Peters.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
And of course, this is like a natural segue because the other big story in the NFC West is off-ball linebackers.
Yes.
And Fred Warner and the big, gigantic contract that Fred Warner signed this week, which I don't remember the numbers on, but it's big and gigantic and long.
There's so many zeros.
There's a lot of zeros. There's a lot of fluff on the end of it too, as you might
Sure.
expect. I gave it a look-see, and it's deflatable in a lot of ways.
Yeah, the first thing is that we all came out, especially on Twitter, the analytics community came out with its opinions about the Fred Warner contract right away. When you always come out with your opinions right away, and then you have to be like, oh, wait a minute, we have to see what the details of the contract are. How many real years are here? How much real money is this?
Nothing really screams scientific method like coming up with an opinion right away.
Opinion first, facts can wait.
But it really brought up this like argument. I think there was a lot of debate in the analytics community on Twitter about the contract because on one hand, there's this sort of belief of off-ball linebackers being a less important position. And on the other hand, Warner excels in coverage, and there's this general belief of coverage being more important than pass rush. And Warner is really good in cover. Like, he's an off-ball linebacker, so it's not like he's as big as, it's not as like it's as big a deal as having a cornerback, but he is like really excels in coverage. I mean, he excels against the run too. He's good.
He's
He's
a very,
good in every
very good
way.
football player. I watched the 49ers season. I did the 49ers chapter this year, and in a rotating cast of football players where they were never the same roster every week because of all the injuries, he's a guy, and they have injuries every year, but he's never missed a game. 16 starts all 3 years, and he pops off the tape. He's always run the ball, making tackles. Doesn't make as many highlight reel plays as a lot of other guys because they're not there to be made necessarily. But when the contract was signed, I thought that's a lot of money. He's very good.
Yeah.
Signing good players is not a bad thing.
Yes, and I'll say this because like the number was 5 years, $95 million. One of the years is phony baloney. It's a $17 million void year, and there's a built-in opt-out for the void years.
We call that Mike Tanier money, by the way.
Yes.
In the biz.
Funny baloney tenure money. The cap hits really hit 2023, 2024. So if you're talking about a contract, you always have to say, where is the cap going to be in a couple of years? And we know it's going to be stratospheric probably in 2023, 2024 when they're not adjusting.
When the money goes up.
When the money goes up and it kind of hits there. So I don't know if a $20 million cap hit in 2024, and it's actually 20 in 2025, it's a $26 million cap hit. That's probably not happening either.
Right.
So you have to extend like highest paid player. This. You have to start by saying the boat's going up again. And so I don't know if that's a bad investment at that point. It seems a little rich, but for a great player, that's probably going to be that might be the 5th highest paid player by then. Linebacker. By
that position, yeah. Salary's going to go up again. The cash is coming.
I do think it's a little dangerous, though. This was kind of a thing that happened in the NBA when there was a huge spike in TV money where basically every contract that got signed, people were like, well, the cap's going up. Like, how big a deal is it? But, like, I think it does get to the point where the 49ers are going to have to pay other players, too, right? And, like, we would all agree that someone like Nick Bosa, despite the injury, is a more important player to lock up long term. They didn't prevent themselves from doing that.
Right.
But, you know, this could be a way to get to that. So I think it is important to consider whether – do we think that signing off-ball linebackers, even that are getting coverage, is that a mistake the way that it might be to sign a running back?
Remember, they don't have, if Trey Lance is the answer, they don't have to pay that quarterback for a couple of years. So you have that built right in.
Yeah,
that gives you more money, but you can then spend that money on other things too, right?
Right.
But they're also a team, and the Lance contract is a great point, but this is also a team that has the highest paid offensive lineman, I believe, in the league. That has shelled out a ton of money to a tight end. That has shelled out a ton of money to a fullback. So they're playing a different game of football than just about anybody else.
The fullback one's weird a little bit. Remember, they're also about to lose the Garoppolo contract at some point. So
that'll help too.
That frees money up.
They do not build a roster like pretty much anyone else in the league right now.
Right, and they reached the Super Bowl 2 years ago, so they're not completely off base on how to.
When it works, it works.
Yeah.
My argument was that you do want to get as many good coverage players as possible, and this is the one they've got. Like, in a vacuum, if you were building your team from scratch, you would rather put your money into having your stars be cornerbacks and safeties.
Yeah.
Like, based on what analytics shows, that is sort of the suggested way to do things.
Yes.
But what they ended up with the way that they've drafted is that this is their guy, and he is a great coverage player. They're not signing, this is not Zach Cunningham. They're not signing a run stopper.
Right.
This is a guy who's great at everything, especially coverage. And they don't have an opportunity necessarily to go out and get a top cornerback with that money.
Right.
Like, better that they use the money, and they have the extra money because they're going to be paying a rookie quarterback for the next few years.
Yeah.
Better that they use it to lock up this really good cover linebacker.
I feel like this would have made a lot of sense if it were really obvious that the 49ers were all in this year.
Right.
But like the Trey Lance draft pick sends a different signal that this team is trying to be successful over a longer period of time. And so that's where you would have to question whether 3 years from now, 4 years from now, would they wish they had done something differently with the money? I'm not sure that they would have, but I think that's where it becomes a real argument.
Right. And I think that's the point. This is a nuanced type of thing. And gosh, what I saw yesterday was a lot of bad because, and then you hit you have a bullet point of that's analytics scented.
Yeah, analytics says off-ball linebackers bad.
My favorite Yankee candle.
Yes.
Analytics.
Analytics scented. Yes.
And Scott said, right, like, wouldn't you feel if it was a running back? What did you say about?
Well, I was talking about the Panthers, obviously,
Yeah.
but with Christian McCaffrey, because
Right.
I think we had the sense that that was a bad move, even though McCaffrey was young, was successful, was actually a good receiver, so that's something that may be a little bit more important for a running back. There were a lot of things that pointed to McCaffrey as being one of the best running backs to sign, but basically I think we all agreed that it was a bad move from like a competitive standpoint, right?
Right.
So there is clearly a line where if you're putting a lot of money in some positions, it's almost always going to be a bad idea, but is that line in between running backs and off-ball linebackers, or is it on the other side of off-ball linebackers, right?
And my argument was, as long as your off-ball linebacker is a really good coverage player, not a run thumper, that I would put the line in between. Like, for example, as a Patriots fan, I am very excited to have Dante Hightower back this year. But I don't think Dante Hightower, even at his peak, was worth the Fred Warner money because he's not in coverage.
Right.
He can rush the passer, he can stop the run, but he's not a coverage player the way Warner is.
Right. And also, where are you putting the money? So if you put $24 in front of a running back, like, he's done. He's probably done. He's probably not the same guy. I feel comfortable that Warner can be this guy in 2023,
Yes.
2024. It's a different. So like, there's value, and then there's length value, which is another factor to this. It's very, very multifaceted.
He's young enough, Warner is, that he should still be an impact player when Trey Lance is a starter and ready to win playoff games.
That's a possibility. Although you say they're rowing the boat in two different directions.
They are, and that's the question I tried to answer. The waters I tried to navigate, to take your boat metaphor another step, in the San Francisco chapter, and it is weird. They are trying to contend for a Super Bowl right now and plan for the future at the same time, and that's never been done.
And it's
Successfully.
You're right, because they found themselves last year as a Super Bowl roster who imploded because of injuries and quarterback ineffectiveness, and they're trying to correct that on the fly.
Yeah.
So, saying, well, what you need to do? Rebuild, because that one didn't work. That's great to say here, and it's not a good thing to say in the boardroom when you have and in a locker room full of guys that were a couple of plays away from beating the Chiefs.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring up, by the way, I thought a really good tweet from Bryce Rossler of Sports Info Solutions about the argument with internet analytics people on Twitter yesterday about the Warner contract, where he says the proposal to play safeties at linebacker is fan fiction. Aside from introducing run game concerns, most teams don't have 4 good safeties.
Also true.
And those players are used to seeing the action from greater depth and positioning themselves differently in coverage. Is there any evidence that replacement level safeties are better in coverage than starting linebackers? How many free agent safeties are free agents because they can't cover adequately? And I think that is a truth. Like, as much as we feel like teams need to be going to dime all the time, and not every team is going to have enough safeties to play dime all the time. And some teams do have really good linebackers that are really good in coverage, like Fred Warner or Levante David. And maybe you would rather have those guys on the field than your 4th safety.
So, Aaron, is there a Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray component to trying to keep Warner? Like, is their division specifically one where they need an athlete to keep up with those quarterbacks? And, like, is Warner particularly equipped to do that in anyone's mind?
I mean, I would say that
It's not.
I don't know if that's
hurt.
a divisional thing, because there's so many of those quarterbacks in the league
that's,
now
that's absolutely fair.
that
yeah.
no matter what division you're in, you would love to have a rangy side-to-side linebacker who can do things like tackle the quarterback on scrambles and identify the mesh point on option
I was just
runs.
wondering if there might be a point where it's like Warner is actually more valuable to the 49ers than we might traditionally think of for a linebacker.
Right.
I mean, there may be an angle
in the
there.
same way that Kyle Juszczyk is more valuable to
exactly.
them because of the role of the fullback in their offense. He has value to them that he wouldn't have to some other team.
That may be true in the locker room. That may be true as like a defensive play caller. There could be. I mean, that's not exactly our bread and butter as analytics people, but I mean, there could be reasons that this makes more sense than it's obvious from an outsider's perspective.
And that's one of the things you always respect when you're doing the analytics, right? It's like, well, there's behind closed doors, they decide this guy's priority. They could be stupid, or it could be a big reason. And this team has won things in the past, so you say they probably do have some good reasons. And that is another component to this.
I think the good news is I don't think there's any reason to suspect Warner is more than a small overpay. It's not like we paid a guy that's not going to give us anything.
That's what
right?
That's where I kind of lean on. It's like they paid a lot for him, but the chance of the dividend working out in their favor is relatively good.
I'll point out Brian Knowles tweeted that based on, he does the free agency cost benefit article every year, and based on his projections of approximate value, this is a small overpay.
Yeah.
Right. That sounds right.
Useful title says, case in point, Nate Gary, a former college safety turned an NFL linebacker. Not good enough for San Francisco to even keep on the roster for this year.
Is you
Nate-
see an Eagles legend, Nate Gary?
Nate Gary is a nightmare. This is a no Nate Gary zone.
Well, I was trying to slip in a little joke here about how the forward-thinking analytical teams never pay linebackers, much like the Eagles.
That's true. Well, they don't. They usually don't pay like that. But
Has
what
there
happened?
been a fist fight on our Twitch show we've done?
Nate Geary was a binky of some of the people who make decisions in Philly, but he was also a guy like the positionless defender. You watch a guy, look at him playing in space in college. There's one honey badger. There's only a couple other guys who do stuff like that. This player that we're waiting for, who's going to replace the Warners of the world, there's 5 of them that exist. So, if you don't get one, don't compete for the Super Bowl, kids. It's like, no, you got a guy here who can do these things. He fits your scheme. You pay him. Like I say, maybe you overpay him a little bit. You have to do something. You have to compete.
Yeah, I'm not. Brian says, did Shaq Thompson not become the ultimate safety linebacker hybrid? Yeah.
He's a good. He's
He's a linebacker, right?
Yeah.
He's not as good as Fred Warner.
There you
Ben,
are.
Ben Muth writes our offensive line column at Football Outsiders. It's very gift heavy, so you see where guys are succeeding and failing in their blocks. And it may have been 2019, but one of his columns he just devoted to one of his teams was playing the defense. It was either Arizona and Dan Buchanan, or the Rams had a safety. They tried to play a linebacker.
Mark Barron.
Mark Barron.
Yeah. Oh God, he was bad.
Well, maybe it was him, but it was one of those
I
teams.
thought he was reasonable.
Not
All-
late in his career. Anyway, go
Yeah.
on.
all of Ben's gifts were of this dime back or a dollar back or whatever they call it,
Yeah.
getting destroyed in blocks over and over and over again
Right,
for an
right.
entire Sunday.
Right. And it's like you do have to still defend the run. We
But
talk
the-
about pass being more important. You still have to defend the run.
Right.
Yes. I understand the idea that you want to invite the other team to run.
Mm-hmm.
You want to play a little smaller because you'd rather have them running than passing, but you don't if they're getting 6 yards a carry.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Right? Like you haven't really gotten
Right.
an advantage by inviting them to run if their run is getting 6 yards a carry. So, reminding everybody you're watching the Football Outsiders Radio Hour live on Twitch, twitch.tv/Football Outsiders, /FB Outsiders. But maybe /Football Outsiders gets you there also. We may need to change that in the scroll on the top. We're also listening to us on your favorite podcast app and watching us on YouTube. And by the way, if you're listening to us on the podcast app, please rate the podcast, rate the Football Outsiders Podcast Network, give us many stars. It does help people find the show.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Be sure to rate the Almanac as well.
If you've purchased the Almanac on Amazon, please go to Amazon.com and please give a good rating to the Football Outsiders Almanac. That also helps people find the book, helps us make money, helps us continue to bring you great football content. CO The Legend says, this conversation reminds me of the Patriots-Chargers game
Yeah.
from the 2018-2019 season when the week after the Chargers were lauded for using all those defensive backs to
Right.
defend against Lamar Jackson, the Patriots just ran all over them.
Yeah. And it was just a very very
Yeah.
simple. Right. It's like that's still in everybody's quiver. You can still do those things in the NFL. So it's like, well, it's more important to defend the pass. So forget the run. That's not good thinking process.
Right. I mean, you can be Kansas City and be like, look, we're just not going to improve our run defense from year over year. But even Kansas City, the run defense DVOA for them is something like 2 or 3% above 0.
Right.
So that's, still not a lot of efficiency. Like it still doesn't make sense for teams to run on Kansas City that much, even though Kansas City is a bad run defense. As long as we're talking NFC West and we have Vince here, the next thing to talk about is the Seattle Seahawks, where, speaking of linebackers, is there any chance of KJ Wright coming back?
Yes, it's not a priority or it would have happened by now. Part of it is making him a priority and re-signing him this offseason would be an admission that the Jordan Brooks draft pick was a waste.
Yeah.
Since they
And-
usually only play 2 linebackers at a time, yeah.
They play. I just edited Brian Knowles' upcoming defensive personnel piece. They use base more than almost anyone, but still, even they only use it about a third of the time, whatever it was. And they're not the kind of team that will sit on a mistake and keep making it just to avoid admitting they made a mistake.
Right.
When Percy Harvin blew up, they got rid of him.
Right.
When Jimmy Graham ran his course, they let him go. So they won't compound on a mistake they make.
Well,
So
Vince, is there any reason to suspect that Brooks is a mistake? He's only played 1 year.
He
was a
he's
first-round
a rookie,
pick.
and they didn't use him that much. And,
Yeah.
Right.
But there's no reason to doubt him. And they would know better than any of us would. The Seahawks would
Right.
if he can play or not. So yeah. And they are also they're really good at letting the market bear out.
Right.
They did not jump out and they didn't re-sign a bunch of guys to extensions. They had a ton of guys hit free agency. Shaquille Griffin got a lot of money from Jacksonville. Not many other guys did. KJ Wright hasn't been signed yet, and he has said the door is open. I think they have said the door is open, but neither of them seem to care, to be quite frankly.
You do wonder, I mean, when guys are still free agents at this point, maybe teams know something we don't about
Yes.
how much they've aged.
That and also how little they might take to come back when the time comes.
Yeah,
What they might sign for in the end. Yeah.
They may also they might be telling him we have a dollar amount we're not going with
Yeah.
it. If you get more than that, congratulations, more power to you. Go, we wish you luck, but we'll stick with our other younger guy.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that the Seahawks, I mean, we're still early in the promotion process for Football Outsiders Almanac 2021, which everybody watching or listening to this should own a copy of by now. But I'm surprised we haven't gotten more pushback yet on the Seattle Seahawks as the sort of projected NFC West top team. Because they're in this sort of interesting space where I think if you look at them from the bottom up by looking at the personnel, you feel like there's a lot of weaknesses, especially the cornerback position. Like, how can you have them being projected as being that good? On the other hand, like, Russell Wilson covers a lot of faults.
But it is interesting because I feel like we have a big gap between us and the public perception of the Steelers.
Right.
And the Steelers and Seahawks were sort of the two teams that had a really bad end of the year that maybe didn't reflect their quality as an overall team.
Right.
So, yeah, it's weird. Why do people disagree with us about the Steelers, but they're comfortable with the Seahawks?
Big Ben is toast versus let Russ cook.
Yeah,
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
Zalem
it.
says Seahawks still have the best quarterback. I mean, one of the best quarterbacks.
in the division.
People
Yes.
really love Matthew Stafford with the Rams now, and by people I mean the general
Rams.
the general
Not us,
the
yeah.
general public, and
Yeah.
people that maybe aren't as into stats that are more tools based analysis.
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the Seahawks still the best quarterback in the division. They have been the most consistently successful team in the division, even though they've been a wild card team more often than not lately. But year to year, you can pretty much guarantee them for 9, maybe 10 games, 10 wins a year now. That's 17 games, and you can't say the same for the Rams in Arizona and San Francisco. They've all had big years, but they've had down years too.
I feel like Pete Carroll falls into one of the pitfalls of the analytics world, which is that the analytics folks on Twitter tend to be very critical of him. Ben Baldwin, in particular, as a Seahawks fan, tend to be really critical of him because the things that we can measure with analytics, he's not good at.
Right.
But I don't think we respect enough that the things we don't measure with analytics, he's really good at.
Yeah,
Right? Like,
90% of coaching things, we have no
Yeah.
vision
Right.
of what's going on.
do I want Pete Carroll to pass the ball more the way they were doing last
Right.
year and not revert into being a run-first team? Hell yes. Do I want them to stop playing so much base defense? Yep. Do I think that he needs to become more aggressive on fourth downs?
Yep.
I've said it to people in the organization. But we do not have analytics to measure the ability of Pete Carroll to inspire his players.
I thought you were going to say heart.
Well, it's not. It's
right.
not.
A heart comes out in the performance. And if you look at the performance, right, I always hate the argument when we say when anti-analytics people say you're not measuring heart. The answer is heart comes out in your performance
Yeah.
just like all of your other muscles.
Right.
And if you're not performing, if you're not producing, I don't care how much heart you have. But you know what? Pete Carroll and heart and inspiration
And
comes out in production, like those players produce.
and preparation and getting guys in the right
Thank you.
position
Yep.
and ready to play and all that. This is big longitudinal stuff. So like, oh, that 6th round pick was ready to play. Puna Ford develops into this guy, etc.
Developing talent is where developing talent is where he's best at. He takes J.R. Reed, essentially off the street and develops him into a starting corner.
Right.
And he's their top corner now, which is not ideal. I agree, but but he got him for nothing. His teams are always prepared.
Yeah.
They always show up. You very, very rarely
Do you say Seattle came out flat this week?
Seattle's not.
Right.
Seattle got embarrassed this week.
No, right.
That doesn't happen.
No.
What do you guys think, Bill Houston, on the chat? And a reminder, you want to watch this on Twitch every Thursday because then you can participate in the chat. Bill Houston says, what do you guys make of Wilson publicly lobbying / bloviating about having more say in roster decisions?
It's worth having a conversation about. It's better to be talking about it than to be, vague booking about it like Aaron Rodgers. It comes down to each team. There are teams that bring somebody like Wilson, like a Tom Brady, into the room to a degree. And what you normally want to do, at the very least, is have the meeting with the guy to talk about what his desires, expectations are, and possibly say to him, here's some of the directions we're going in. For example, drafting your replacement, so everything's on the table. Yeah. So I don't worry about too much. Obviously, Wilson's like second on this list of Rodgers anyway. I think it's logical for them to be talking about it. If it's done right, though, it's not a conversation we're hearing.
I understand if Wilson is a little frustrated about offensive line.
Yeah.
But, first of all, they gave him great receivers.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay? And including, by the way, Dwayne Eskridge is a playmaker, score, sleeper. And then they gave him Dwayne Brown at left tackle. There have been problems on the rest of the line, but they went out and got a darn good left tackle for him.
I think what the Packers have really shown, going back to the Packers, obviously, is that it's really the communication is the thing it's important. It's not the moves. Like both of these front offices have done a really good job of making their teams competitive. Mm-hmm. You could say this about the Patriots as well, and it may not always be like the skill talent specifically, but they've made competitive rosters. But I think we're just past the point where we were 10, 15 years ago where the front office does everything and the players just play.
Yeah.
Those quarterbacks are powerful, and their front offices are going to have to be open and honest with them, even if it's telling them, here's what we're doing, and it may not make the most sense to you and be exactly what you want to do, but we're going to communicate with you.
Right, and then you're like, well, then I won't sign the next extension, and I'll be Brady, and I'll walk away, rather than I signed the extension, and now I didn't realize you would do this, and I was hoping you'd do this, and you're like, we didn't ask your opinion. That's the part that's negative.
I mean, my suspicion is that as soon as Russell Wilson said anything to the public, the front office was like calling him and talking to him, and that's why we haven't heard about it anymore. Yeah. And I think they probably handled it a lot better than the Packers did, right?
Well, that's clear.
Yeah.
That's abundantly obvious.
Right. Biscuit Belly is handling things better than the Packers and Rodgers are right now.
Biscuit Belly, located next door to where we are currently recording this podcast. If you saw Mike's Twitter this morning, you saw the delicious Biscuit Benny sandwich that we had for breakfast. Useful title says, not to bring everything back to the Eagles, too late, but Carson Wentz's situation last season comes to mind.
Yeah.
Well, except we're talking about great quarterbacks, not quarterbacks that fall off a cliff.
And there's probably a difference between Russell Wilson expecting to be in the conversation more and Carson Wentz expecting to be in the conversation more. Even last year, it's like that's a level of gravitas that you have to earn. And I'm not going to use Carson Wentz and gravitas in the same sentence ever again.
Well, I mean, the Eagles weren't a problem of bad communication with Carson Wentz. The problem was Carson Wentz became really bad suddenly without expectation, right?
And bad at communication, too.
Okay.
Well, yeah, because I don't think they told Carson, hey, we're drafting Jalen Hurts.
Got a little bad at adulting.
There were all those stories about the miscommunications in the front office, and this guy, the owner didn't like what Peterson was doing, and Peterson didn't like what Howie Roseman was doing, and they didn't like what Carson Wentz was doing, and I mean, there's lots of behind-the-scenes stuff.
Yep.
I think my favorite lead in Football Outsiders Almanac this year is who are the Philadelphia chapter?
That was Dan Pizzuto.
Dan Pizzuto, who just begins. Well, that escalated quickly.
Yes, it's perfect, and that was what it was.
It certainly did.
Yeah, let me tell all of our fans, please do not go and read my Eagles chapter in the previous year's almanac. Let's just scrub that from the history of Football Outsiders.
There's a few of those that we should probably burn from the public record.
Listen, that goes all the way back to having Kevin Jones on the cover of the first book as the predicted rushing champion. So believe me, you're not the first person to make those errors. The fourth team in the NFC West, by the way, gets to the other thing we were going to do today, which is I'll let Mike introduce the Josh Allen third-year leap drinking game.
Yes. Every time a local media person wants to say that their quarterback is going to make a sudden leap, just like Josh Allen, Now, of course, if quarterbacks made this leap every time, we wouldn't say, just like Josh Allen. We're going to say, they're going to grow in the third year. So it is the Josh Allen TM drinking game, where we take some quarterbacks and also some coaches and other players and say, will they or won't they make the third year leap? And folks at home, we don't have the props here. The bourbon is waiting right outside. Take a drink every time we talk about the Josh Allen third year leap, and please set your car keys on fire or something before you do this.
So we'll start with Kyler Murray from the Arizona Cardinals, right? Because I think I've talked to a lot of people doing promotion for the book, and I keep bringing up the fact that the most common leap for a quarterback is from year 1 to year 2.
Right.
Do some quarterbacks take a leap in year 3? Some do. But if you look at the average performance for all quarterbacks, it goes up in year 2, and then it just kind of wavers for the next few years, and then it starts to decline after like year 10 or whatever. So I think there is a little bit of a feeling of, well, Allen leapt in year 3. Why doesn't Kyler Murray leap in year 3?
Take a drink.
Right.
Go on.
So I think Kyler Murray is most likely going to be about what he was last year, which is about average.
On the whole average, he's a fascinating quarterback. He's so unique. I think he's the best scrambler in the league. Lamar is probably better on design runs, but his quickness, and he's so dang small. It's hard to. You ever try to tackle a rabbit?
Right.
Hard. So, and his highlight plays are so great that we all remember the Hail Murray. But he's inconsistent, and he has a lot of turnover-worthy passes that aren't always caught. So his ball security is definitely something he needs to work on. Although I was a little surprised, Aaron and I did an interview for Arizona yesterday, and I was a little surprised that the general perception among the Cardinals public a lot matches up with what we were saying. I was expecting more pushback.
Okay.
So, but they're all kind of agnostic on Murray and the Cardinals too.
See,
so
that surprises me because I feel like the broader public opinion is that Cliff Kingsbury is the problem,
and I would definitely say he's the bigger problem.
Right, 'cause I mean,
he's the one who needs to grow more in his third year leap in the Josh Allen drinking game.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Take a drink.
Did I do that right?
Your
Yes.
chapter,
Okay.
Vint, wasn't your chapter about how there was such a limited route tree? Like, do you think
Yeah.
that's about the limitations Murray has specifically, or
I
is that
thought-
about?
I thought about that too. I didn't really get into it for space reasons, but essentially they don't throw to the middle of the field. They do not throw post routes.
Anti-Ravens.
They do not throw in routes. That's a funny thing is the two best runners are totally opposite in the passing game. But yeah, they don't throw post routes. They don't throw in routes. They very rarely throw drags or crosses. It's all sidelines, and a big part of it is what the air raid is designed to do is just spread the defense, throw short passes underneath, let guys make tackles, and then do it again. So you're counting on guys taking a curl route, well, in particular DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah.
Take this curl route, break 5 tackles, and score. That's their game plan.
When he's always on the left side, often in a bunch formation, rolling the defense in that direction.
And it got to the point where, like, I know what's going to happen. I'm sure these defensive coordinators know exactly what's going to happen. And then what happened? So there's more room for obvious growth from Cliff Kingsbury from an X's and O's standpoint than from Kyler Murray from an athletic standpoint, obviously.
Or maybe from Kyler Murray if he ends up getting a new coach in the future. I mean, there was like the Jared Goff, his leap happened in year 2 because that's when Sean McVay arrived.
Right,
Like,
right.
Is Murray going to leap when a new coach comes to town?
I would say, I said yesterday on this interview, like, if you asked me what was going to happen after this year, I think it's much more likely that Kingsbury moves on. If they don't make the playoffs this year, that they lose Kingsbury and they have another coach and they give Murray a year to try to make it work with another coach,
Right.
than that they give up on Murray after year 3.
And that makes sense.
I will say a little cheeky asks, if not quarterbacks, what position group is most likely to take a leap in year 3? And I do not have research on this that I can present. My subjective first thought is wide receivers.
Yeah.
I think wide receivers is a good one. And
Tight ends as
Tight
well.
ends.
Tight end has the steepest learning curve.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
yeah.
maybe not of every position, but of all the fantasy relevant positions.
Right.
Yeah.
So, like, it wouldn't be weird to me, just throwing out an example, for Irv Smith to really jump out this
Okay.
year. Playing for the Vikings, he was a high pick, but really hasn't been a huge part of their offense. And, they've had veteran Kyle Rudolph there the previous 2 years, and I think that there are a lot of responsibilities to learn that would then unlock playing time for Smith that would then let him do his like natural catching of the ball. Like he's probably already equipped to be a really good pass catcher in the league, but if he can't do all the other stuff,
Right.
that's why he hasn't been playing.
So you're saying Irv Smith could make the Josh Allen third-year leap?
Drink.
Yes, I'm not sure that's quite the equivalent, but yes.
Well, no, you're right, because and rookie tight ends often struggle because if you're to be an effective tight end in the NFL, you basically have to be a wide receiver and an offensive lineman.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot to learn.
In Smith, 23.5% DVOA last year was 8th best at the position, but that was over 30 some catches, right? It's,
Right.
He looks like he's already one of the best receivers at
Well,
the position.
Yeah, but a lot of times what is perceived as a leap is just more opportunity,
True.
and
Right.
and the opportunity's there. So
In the old days, it definitely was wide receiver because it was the old Bill Walsh. It takes 3 years to learn the West Coast offense. Nowadays, you wind up in the 4-receiver package, you wind up being the screen guy, et cetera, et cetera. So, while I'm sure guys take the third-year leap, it's not like, 12 catches, 13 catches, 84 catches. You still see that, I think, at tight end because it's like you can't get on the field at all unless you're like a crackerjack blocker until you adjust in that way.
Yeah. Now there are receivers that I think it makes sense to kind of follow this line of
Okay.
thinking, but there are always reasons, right? So like one example, McCole Hardman for the Chiefs.
Okay.
He was blocked, right? They had really good pass catchers in
Yeah.
front of him. Sammy Watkins very talented, even if fantasy players didn't always love him.
Right.
There's a reason. Paris Campbell for the Colts missed
Okay.
a lot of the last 2 seasons with ACL injuries, kidney injuries, collarbone, like every injury that you've ever seen. And so like I think a lot of people think he's probably done because of that, but Keenan Allen had a very similar start to his career and has made 4 straight Pro Bowls since becoming healthy. Jacoby Myers, a guy that wasn't a receiver.
We just lost the Twitch sign. I love it.
Good night, folks.
I just broke Twitch with my hot takes, guys. No, Jacoby Myers, a guy that was undrafted, so maybe wasn't getting the early opportunities of, say, in N'Keal Harry type of player, but suddenly last year over the second half was getting a lot of targets. Like they're wide receivers. There's reasons why they could break out in year 3,
Right.
but for the the earlier round guys, those guys are getting opportunities.
So I'll put you on the spot. Which of those guys do you think will take a Josh Allen third-year leap?
drink.
I don't think it's McCole Hardman. I think that they have other players like a DeMarcus Robinson that may kind of eat into that work too. Honestly, this is going to be weird, and maybe Aaron can respond. I think it might be Jacoby Myers, even though the Patriots brought in a lot of new wide receivers.
9,000 new receivers and tight ends. Yeah.
It was just really weird. Myers would have been an effective fantasy player last season, but he didn't catch a touchdown pass. And I think people think that's what's going to happen forever for the Patriots. But I think if Cam Newton can't really throw the ball this year, they're just going to move on to their rookie, right? So either Newton's shoulder is going to be better, or he's not going to be starting in week 6, right?
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, thank you to Matthias01, who says he wanted to thank us for all we do, making watching football an actual experience with in-depth analysis, which in turn gives him an idea of certain matchups and keys to watch for. I'm converting my friends to deep diving into FO's wealth of knowledge.
Excellent.
I still have a hard time telling what DVOA is to my dad, though. Just tell him it's efficiency.
Yeah.
That's all.
If it
DVOA
makes-
is efficiency. And thank you for your kind words.
Thank you.
If it makes you feel any better, my dad has specifically said, do not get him a copy of the book.
This is a topic for off camera, I'm sure.
If you're watching this, you should have a copy of the book. Remember,
I'm
not
assuming
only,
this audience, I didn't just kill a sale, I don't think.
it's
but-
525 pages of football analysis, and it kills mosquitoes. It's amazingly useful.
My own mother said my novel was too depressing. It's a romantic comedy.
As far as quarterbacks taking a third-year leap, Danny Dimes. What do we think about Danny Dimes? Because look, I mean, listen, a lot of these conversations we're having with local reporters to promote the Almanac, you have to say the same thing about the team if the quarterback takes a leap, right? Like the Giants, Kenny Golladay is there now. Saquon Barkley will be back healthy. The offensive line should improve a little bit more experience. There's some players on defense. Like, everything is like, if Danny Dimes takes the leap, if
What
Danny
leap?
Dimes takes the leap.
What leap?
That's the
Josh
thing.
Allen
It's the
leap.
Josh Allen leap, right?
Drink. Okay, great. Go on.
But I don't see it likely to happen.
Well, we were.
Good.
I don't think any of us were high on him coming out of college. Mike's.
I wasn't as down. I mean, you remember, people were just eviscerating him, and it's like they drafted, a turd or something like that.
People were mad that they didn't take him 30 picks later. It's not like they thought that he could never make it in the NFL. Right?
There were some people who were like, I can't see a thing that he does right. Like there was this really ripping, like you follow draft Twitter, especially like they'll get on a roll and the kid's garbage at some points. I was a little less negative than that.
Yeah. But I think that, like I said about third-year leaps being rare, usually by the end of year 2, you sort of know what he is. Now, he's really good last year at deep throws, and they want to go deep a lot. Like, they want to go deep to Darius Slayton and Kenny Golladay. He just struggles with the short and intermediate stuff. Zalem says the NFL windows are too small for him, and I think that's an accurate statement.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's the key to it, and also getting the ball out a little quicker and being smarter to avoid the rush. He can move decently, but doesn't avoid the rush smartly. Yeah, it's like, backfill from this deep ball. I don't know many examples of guys who backfilled from a deep ball into being overall successful.
Right. In the modern NFL, there just isn't enough deep passing that you can. I mean, they want to be an old school team that's running and deep throws.
Right.
Well, they added a good receiver in Kenny Golladay to join
really
Darius Slayton
receiver.
to have really good deep throws.
Right.
But I mean, I don't want this to be my corner, guys. So don't make this my thing. But I think Drew Lock has a better chance than Danny Dimes. And so he's been more successful so far in his career. Daniel Jones, negative 19.2% and negative 22.4% DVOA in his first 2 years. Lock, not much better, but 2.2% and negative 16.2%. But also dealing with shoulder and rib injuries, things that could actually affect the passing. Jones has been pretty healthy. I think there's a lot more likelihood that kind of by not seeing Lock on the field and healthy, like maybe he could be the guy that comes out of nowhere
And takes the Josh Allen third-year leap.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say.
I should have wrote Bell.
He also has a better supporting cast, both defensively and skill talent wise, even with the offseason additions that the Giants have made.
Right. Jones was a little bit banged up from most of the second half last year, so there was a little bit of that.
Okay, so maybe I'm underrating that.
Well, yeah, but you're right. The supporting cast is definitely there. The one thing Locke has is a competitor for his job. Daniel Jones would have to really lose this job to lose it, whereas Locke has got like one strike and he'll probably be out.
Well, yeah. If Locke isn't good, then it doesn't matter. Like,
Right.
But that's true of Jones too.
That's
right?
a good point. Right.
Yeah.
It's not a third year.
Well,
a Josh Allen third year leap if you just play all year.
It's important because if Locke isn't good out of the gate, he's done. Jones, if he's bad in September, will have a chance to save the season.
Yeah,
So he'll be the year 4 leap, is what we're saying.
I had
Or cut.
I had to look up who Jones's backup is.
Who is it?
It's Mike Glennon.
Nice.
Oh my God.
Mike
State
Glennon's
legend.
still in the National Football League.
Mike Lennon, the guy that NC State gave the quarterback job to over Russell Wilson. You may forget.
Mike Leonard probably would be available in an expansion draft, I think.
And I wouldn't take him. I would not take him. You're right.
No, I wouldn't either.
Everywhere he's gone, a disastrous decision has followed at quarterback. You know, the Bears just decreed he's a starter now because they didn't want to hear about Colin Kaepernick, and they handed all of this money to him. And then they get Trubisky to replace him. He is like Typhoid Mary going through the
Well, Glennon's really tall, so I mean maybe that
quite
Elway
tall.
should trade for him. He could be a
quite tall.
Broncos, be part of that mix.
It's amazing he hasn't been on the Broncos yet.
Yeah.
Wasn't he in Tampa Bay right before they drafted Jameis Winston, too?
Yeah. Yeah, and he had this 1 year, and the thing is, if you look at his good stat year, there was a game where the Ravens went up like 38-3 at halftime.
Yeah.
And there were about three touchdowns on Glennon's like 12 touchdown good season that was just him playing against scrubs in the fourth quarter of a game that was down by 31 points.
He actually had a game with Tampa Bay where they took Seattle to overtime. And I remember thinking, which of these quarterbacks is Russell Wilson again?
Oh my goodness!
Just any given Sunday.
Well, that happened last year with Colt McCoy.
Yeah.
So things
Must you?
things happen. So the other thing to talk about the Josh Allen third-year leap
Ding.
is coaches. So we brought up Kingsbury. You don't want to say Bruce Arians because he's in his third year, but
Well, he make me third year
he's
leap.
kind of leapt already.
He's win a bigger Lombardi.
So Zach Taylor is in his third year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Brian Flores in Miami is in his third year. And then Vic Fangio in Denver, although it seems weird to talk about a guy in his 60s taking any kind of leap at all.
Right.
I certainly would like Vic
it's a big step.
Fangio to be more aggressive on fourth downs. I'm very disappointed with how conservative Denver has been on fourth downs over the last couple of years.
Oh yeah, and that's your old school defensive coach at work there.
Yeah.
I mean, Flores is the obvious one, right? But
Right.
that whole franchise has been moving in that rebuilding direction, so it just seems so natural But I mean, are we sure Zach Taylor's a bad coach just because that team has been horrible the last 2 years? I mean, I think they're moving in the right direction too. They're just a little bit behind the Dolphins.
There were guys running, screaming out of that organization last year. There really were. There were guys retiring. There were Dunlap.
The thing I don't understand about Zach Taylor is if he's from the Sean McVay family, why do they not run play action more? They're like near the bottom of the league in play action. If he's trying to be Sean McVay, why is he not trying to be Sean McVay?
Is it because Burrow doesn't have a good arm? Like he seems like more of a spread type guy, right?
It is a spread offense. He's the bad seed of the Sean McVay family.
The black sheep.
He's the black sheep. Yeah. I don't know, but I can see like if you want to say, what's the story of Zach Taylor taking the Josh Allen third-year leap?
Ding.
Okay, it would be Burrow develops. They have this spread offense with all these receivers, and the team rises up. So I can see a logical way that he rises up and does that. It's almost like Flores would have a harder chance. He has to go to the Super Bowl to demonstrate that he's taking this big step forward because the team's already winning a little bit, and it'll be like accredited to like the great. It'll be Belichick will get credit for it, if Brian Flores rises up because of of the mentorship.
It's like which NFL head coaches would have taken Brandon Allen, on a playoff run? That's
few, very very few.
Just like the title says,
fourth best Allen quarterback last year.
Josh,
Kyle, my guy Kyle.
Yeah.
Was there another one?
Maybe that was it. I don't remember.
Will Burrow even be the same after his knee injury? I think guys have come back from ACLs pretty good, actually. Like we've been able to recover from ACLs pretty good.
Burrow is sneaky athletic. I mean, obviously you say that because he's white, right? But that is kind of a big part of his game. So you would hope that hasn't affected the mentality.
That's the mentality that you worry about a quarterback because it's like, well, he's in the pocket, he'll be able to move.
Is that what happened to Wentz? I mean,
no,
he suffered that knee injury and he never really was quite the same.
It might be part of it. The princess and the pig. Go on.
Bill Houston says, will Josh Allen's growing role in his local freedom militia diminish his quarterback development in Buffalo? This is not something I know about. This is only something I know about his receivers.
Is this about the Buffalo anti-vaxxers who've got everything they need to win the Super Bowl except the antibodies?
I will say, I'll end with this. Tom Pelissero tweeted that the NFL has informed teams that if a game cannot be rescheduled because of a COVID outbreak during the 2021 season among unvaccinated players, the team with the outbreak will forfeit.
Okay.
Tom Pelissero put forfeit in all capital letters and be credited with a loss for playoff seeding.
Okay.
The Panthers are a top 4 vaccinated team as of a week ago, according to ESPN. So
there you go.
Good news for us.
There we go. That's how we're going to get Sam Darnold into the playoffs.
A dozen teams to forfeit every week, and you'll be good.
That's probably the easiest path.
You got to protect Mono Guy.
All right, that does it for the Football Outsiders Radio Hour. We want to thank everybody for joining us here on twitch.tv/FBOutsiders. Thank you for listening on your favorite podcast app. Thank you for watching on YouTube. Again, a reminder, please rate us on your podcast app. Help people find the show. Also, please come watch the Twitch on Thursdays at 1 p.m. because we love to have the interaction on the chat. And watch Scott's new weekly fantasy Twitch starting next Tuesday, 1 p.m. Tuesdays for the big fantasy football Twitch. Will more Darrell Henderson talk, I'm sure.
No doubt.
Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next week. Thank you again thanks to the Edge Sports team for hosting us in Louisville. We've had a great time. Thanks to Mike. Thanks to Vince. Thanks to Scott. And we'll see you all next week on the Football Outsiders Radio Hour. Take care.